Monster Hunter is one of my all-time favorite franchises. I started playing it back on the Wii with Try, and have played nearly all the entries since. The thought of loading up and heading out to fight these towering monsters in a David versus Goliath situation was so appealing to me. To take a weapon in hand, embark out into the wilderness, and utilize your survival and combat skills to best what seems impossible odds really spoke to me and my friend group. Also, making it a 4-player co-op almost makes it feel like a combination action party game. When Monster Hunter World came out for the PS4, I played the game and only that game exclusively for most of the year. The number of hours I racked up is borderline embarrassing, but to be honest, I wouldn't change that for the world. It was an excellent way to get to hang out with my friends and have something to do in the background. It also bred healthy competition amongst us to try and one-up each other all the time. Despite the multiplayer being hella trash for a mass majority of the game, in the late game I spent a lot of time playing between friends and randos that I would meet. And while playing with these randos, I started to notice similarities with people and their weapon choices. Now, I don't believe in astrology, but if you tell me what weapon you main in these games, I can get a pretty good sense of your personality and character. I started thinking about this more and more while playing Monster Hunter Rise, the newest entry in the series, and I would write down little by little what each one would make me think of or what kind of people I would see brandishing these weapons. And if you couldn't tell by the title, I'm going to tell you what these weapons say about you. And I'm pretty sure this intro is probably boring the shit out of you already, so let's just kind of get into it. These are typically the first weapon most people will cling to and then stick with through most of the game. They're really simple and deliver insane amounts of damage with their slash combos. They also genuinely just feel really cool and powerful to use. Their foreboding size gives the hunter a strong silhouette and strikes fear into the hearts of even the most enraged Rathalos. Unfortunately, it's a little on the slow side, and if you enjoy mobility, you're not going to be a huge fan. If you're wanting more of a challenge out of a weapon, maybe give this one a try to get you comfortable with hunts, but try and pursue a different weapon. So, what does the Greatsword say about you? Well, you're a shrimp IRL, you're compensating for something, and you want to be a team player with the least amount of effort. Fast, elegant, and heavily combo focused, the longsword is the complete package. It's very simple once you figure out how the spirit gauge works, and it deals excellent damage really quickly. I find the longsword to be the best starter weapon personally. Just about all of them look really cool, and the specials and spirit gauges look cool when landing blows. Despite that it can dish out damage rapidly, the individual blows are on the lighter side of damage, and because you're slashing so fast, you tend to blast through your sharpness. So you'd want to pair quick sharpening with this weapon. Overall, still really solid, but what does the longsword say about you? You're absolutely a weeaboo. You also want to take charge with no leadership skills, and you're probably an avid VR chat user. A classic choice for those who don't really know what weapon is right for them. Probably the best balance of damage and defense, it's definitely the safe choice for going solo. Your sword can do some good damage, and the shield will prevent you from being the homie that faints the third and final time, leaving everyone to groan about having to restart the hunt. While it's a safe choice, it's also the most boring choice in my opinion. I've used the sword and shield quite a bit when I first started playing Monster Hunter a couple years ago, but after a few hunts I got so bored of using that I had to try something else. So with this in mind, what does the sword and shield say about you? You're basic, you drink chai tea, and your most played game is probably Animal Crossing. Okay, so these things are super cool. If you're into the aesthetic of being the cool lone wolf, this is the weapon for you. They go crazy hard when you enter demon mode. They're no doubt the most stylish weapon on the roster, and build up damage quickly with lightning fast slashes. As far as damage goes on an individual basis, these are on the weaker side, maybe the weakest. But as long as you're landing every blow, it won't be much of a problem. If you think these are the weapons for you, what do they actually say about you as a person? You were probably an emo in high school, you play League of Legends, and you refuse to try any other weapon type. What's there to say about these weapons? It's exactly what you think it is and what you can expect from it. This is the big boy weapon, the daddy of wallops. It goes without saying that you won't have a ton of mobility with the hammer, but regardless of that, it's still one of the most fun and simple weapons to mess around with. If you need blunt force to break off monster parts, you're not going to find a better weapon to have in your rotation than this. The punch this thing packs is awesome, and during Monster Hunter World, this was my secondary weapon of choice. Circling back to the mobility issues, this one requires good prior planning because the windup for the attacks is extremely slow, and typically speaking, the sharpness is pretty bad comparable to about every other weapon. But let's get to the important stuff. What does the hammer say about you? You couldn't figure out any other weapon type. You constantly yell, "Hammer time," right before getting a good hit in. You're kind-hearted and patient despite the rest of the hunters getting really annoyed with you. Okay, so I have to preface with this. The hunting horn has a special place in my heart. When I first started playing Monster Hunter back during Monster Hunter Tri, it was my first main weapon, and I used it for a lot of that game. I had this mindset that it was probably a useless weapon for solos, but if I played solos with it, I would be training at 100 times Earth's gravity. So when playing with friends, I would be on my A game. This weapon is insanely versatile. It's usually regarded as a support weapon, but it's honestly so much more. It's like they took the blunt damage of the hammer, gave it speed, then gave you the ability to buff you and your fellow hunters and debuff the monsters. It's a very charming weapon with really neat upgrades. It does have a fair share of disadvantages though. Its attack power and speed is extremely low. The attack move set is limited, and to utilize the main focus of the weapon, the songs, requires you to stand still for an abhorrent amount of time. But if you can look past all this, what does the hunter horn say about you? There's no nice way to say this, but you eat crayons. You exclusively play a bard in D&D, and this is the closest weapon that translates to that. And you radiate bottom energy. I can't believe I just... I can safely say I have the least amount of experience with this one. This weapon is the poster child for counterattack defensive playstyles. A good lance user can do an entire hunt taking next to no damage. This isn't to say that it can't hold its own in the damage department, as you can land massive number blows with thrust combos. If you want to be a tank, this is probably the weapon for you. Unfortunately, its attack set is probably the smallest of all the weapons. Dodging with it's insanely hard, and it's an overwhelmingly slow weapon overall. That being said, what does the lance say about you? Well, you think your weapon is elegant, but it really isn't. You probably work at a Burger King, and sadly, you're gonna miss about 90% of the hits you try to take on a monster. In my humble yet correct opinion, this is the hardest weapon to main. I feel like you have to be on some next level to be able to pull off plays with the GunLance. It has this unique mechanic of using explosive shells, making the GunLance a portable mortar cannon with a bayonet. Strangely enough, the explosions are registered as slash damage. It also has the longest range of the Blade Master weapons. If you need to break off parts that require that, and you can get over the difficulty curve, this is for sure the go-to weapon. The downsides to it are all the amounts of downtime you have for reloading and setting up the hits. Also, in most of the Monster Hunter games, you can stagger your fellow hunters by hitting them, and this weapon is notorious for doing that because of how wide the shots are. So with all of this in mind, what does the GunLance say about you? You're literally an insane person. You drink Monster Energy drinks and own a Monster Energy hat, and you actively use 4chan. Now this is my bread and butter weapon. Hands down, my favorite weapon in the entire game. I see online a lot of people complain about using it, and I also see a lot of people who use it who don't even know how to use it. I've clocked quadruple digit hours on this weapon across all of the games it appears in. Mobility wise, there isn't a weapon in the game that even compares. You can pole vault into the air and keep yourself propelled with air blasts and successive hits on the monsters. If you're good enough, you don't even have to touch the ground for a lot of the fight. You also get a little bug friend that hangs out and takes commands from you to extract fluids from the monsters that give you buffs. Depending on the game, there's usually 3 in total: red, orange, and white, with each monster having a specific spot for each. Once you have all 3, you can enter Berserk mode where you just tear through enemies. Now, It also has its fair share of downsides. Controlling the bug is hard to get used to at first, and it can be really annoying trying to get into berserk mode, making you useless for the first bit of every fight. And it doesn't have the highest damage output compared to other weapons that don't need the setup. The air maneuvering can also be really annoying to figure out as well. Bias aside, what does the insect glaive say about you? You think 2 button presses equal 200 IQ plays. You love to waste people's time, and you wear oversized jorts. The switch axe is the master of combos, both an axe and a sword in one weapon. It's a 2-for-1 deal. This weapon used to be a little cumbersome, but as it is now, it's very fast and very fun to use. I could see this being a fantastic first main. It has a lot of versatility to offer, with the added benefit of your combos looking cool, especially when you switch it mid-combo. I think I've seen this weapon mained more by random hunters that I've played with than any other weapon, but of course, that's just anecdotal, because I'm sure there's numbers that say otherwise. The biggest downside of this weapon is how often you're going to have to sharpen it, because your constant comboing is just going to tear through the meter. You definitely benefit from quick sharpening with this one. You have to be really dedicated to your attacks, because once you start comboing, it's hard to break off from them to dodge or move, and there's no form of guarding, making it the all or nothing weapon. So what does the switch axe say about you? You're indecisive, you're impulsive, and you're also the type of person to not order food, but eat all of your friends' fries. This is the switch axe's slower older brother. Now, this weapon, much like the hammer, can pack one hell of a punch. This weapon also has a sword and axe mode, but with a slight twist. For starters, the sword comes with a shield, and successive hits with the sword build up files that you can then switch to the axe mode and unleash devastating explosions that you've built up. Of course, it also has its downsides. You can actually overcharge in sword mode, which causes your attacks to bounce, and the shield's usage chunks the sharpness of the weapon. So, that being said, what does this weapon say about you? You're the less attractive yet funnier best friend of a switch axe main. You have a pea-sized bladder and you hold it in until the last minute. You will overcharge on every hunt at least one time. The Rudy Tooty point and shooty weapon.
You're not funny!
Shut up, bitch. The light bowgun is the mobile counterpart to the heavy bowgun. This weapon is good for those who want to stay out of the way of direct attacks and for people who want to have utilitarian playstyle. I do see a lot of people go support roles with their light bowguns, but it also has a lot of damage capability, as well as being able to aim for places that melee weapons usually have a hard time hitting. The ammo management can be really annoying, and while it can do good damage, it's far on the lighter side compared to all melee weapons and even other ranged weapons. Typically, you'll stick to elemental damage as opposed to raw damage output, and that can be hard to manage as well. With all that out of the way, what does the light bowgun say about you? You just want to help out your friends. You'll grow up to be a helicopter parent. You're afraid of conflicts. Much like the former weapon, but heavier. The heavy bowgun is similar to the GunLance in the fact that it's just a portable mortar cannon. It has a special mode called Siege Mode that roots you in place and basically turns you into a human turret. This one is a bit shorter range and mobility than its lighter counterpart, but makes up for it in the amount of damage it can output. Basically, just consider it the same as the light bowgun, except that it's heavier and you're stronger. And of course, this comes with the obvious downside that because it's heavier, you are therefore slower and your dodge rolls suck. So, what does the heavy bowgun say about you? You used to be obsessed with WWE, you're hot-headed and stubborn, you also think that the last hit on the monster was always made by you every single time. Lastly, we have the third ranged weapon, the bow. This weapon feels like a good in-between of the light and heavy bowgun. You have infinite arrows, so you don't have to worry about managing ammo, but instead you do have to manage arrow coatings, which give you different attributes to your shots. You have a couple of shot modes as well, ranging from rapid fire, spread shot, and your specialized charge, which works similar to some melee weapons. The bow being so light, of course, gives you the most mobility of the three, and has a wide arrangement of cool upgrades. The downsides are managing your coatings, which are resource heavy, though this isn't that much of a deal, as you'll probably default to power coatings. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about what this final weapon says about you. You were a massive fan of Inuyasha or Lord of the Rings, or both. You grew up in a podunk town. You're also a stoner. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video. Be sure to tell me what you think down below. Do any of these hit close to home, or do you feel like I missed the mark? Be sure to watch some of these other videos I've made too, and if you want to keep up with current going-ons and sometimes catch a giveaway or two, come find me on Twitter. Okay, bye!